everyone. I'm Jessica Stern, Senior Manager for Local Arts and Business Partnerships here at Americans for the Arts. Welcome to the first session of part 2 of the How to Partner with Your Chamber of Commerce series, Local Arts Agencies and Ecosystem Thinking. We have multiple resources available for you on this activity page to view in tandem with this recording. Access the toolkit under the Toolkit tab, the transcript for this video under the Transcript tab, and additional resources are under the Resources tab. Email us at artsu@artsusa.org should you need any assistance. I'm so pleased to welcome Mark Nerenhausen, President and CEO of Hennepin Theater Trust in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Thank you so much for joining us, Mark, and I'll hand it over to you.
I'm Mark Nerenhausen, President and CEO of Hennepin Theater Trust. Just a little bit of background. I've been in the business going on 40 years now. I've spent my entire career with about 6 years as an academic at Syracuse University as senior staff or leading major performing arts centers, including performing arts centers, the Tennessee Performing Arts Center, Milwaukee Performing Arts Center, the Performing Arts Center Authority in Fort Lauderdale, and now Hennepin Theater Trust. And by way of background, Hennepin Theater Trust is an organization in Minneapolis. We operate 5 theaters. We're the heart of the Hennepin Theater District. We have about a $40 million budget. We attract about 600,000 ticket buyers a year. And in addition to our theater operations, we have 2 small event centers. We have a robust public art program, and we partner with 100 schools across the state of Minnesota as part of our education program. And so what I'm here today to talk to you about is from advocacy to relevance, moving from correlation to causation and connecting culture to the civic agenda, or to put it in more theatrical terms, how to get in the room where it happens. And I apologize for that, that lack of elegant title in the first part, but I was at a meeting recently with some academics planning a program, and one of them said, you always have to have a colon in the title when you're an academic, and having some academic experience myself, I just simply couldn't resist. But despite the unwieldy title, the point remains. The question that we're trying to solve for is, how do the arts become relevant? How do we connect? And if we are to succeed in our mission or gain more support, we need to become relevant. Now, one thing the arts always need is funding. That's not in question. And our response has usually been that the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. So we need money, we ask for money. We need money to do art and missions, so we ask for money. And we have all the arguments down for why this is important. We in the arts talk about how it's an essential part of the community. It's an essential part of human experience. We are able to list all the extrinsic values of the arts. We're able to talk about economic impact and tourism and reputation, establishment and management, education, and more. We are really, really good at advocating. We have advocacy days, and we practice our elevator speeches. So when we encounter someone who is in a position of influence, when we're networking, we can make our case. But the problem is, even as we advocate for the arts, we express frustration because we can't seem to connect with the levers of power. We advocate very well for our organizations, but there's sometimes frustration because it seems to us that despite the impacts that we create, the arts aren't part of the civic strategy. They're not part of the larger discussion of tourism strategies or business recruitment or urban development. We can't seem to find our place with chambers of commerces, tourism agencies, downtown business associations. So as the title of the song from Hamilton goes, we want to be in the room where it happens. But all too often, we're not in the room where it happens. And that matters because as a result of not being in the room, our communities leave impact on the table. And we as arts organizations leave mission and support on the table. So if we are so good at advocating, why can't we get in the room? And that's what I want to talk about today. how do we get in the room where it happens? How do we connect? How do we really become relevant to our communities? So the answer to this question is the words of another famous playwright. Shakespeare had it right. The fault, dear Brutus, is not in our stars, but in ourself. It's up to us to change the paradigm. It's up to us to understand what it takes to get in the room where it happens. We can't simply depend on other people realizing this and inviting us. We have to put ourselves in a position to be invited. So ultimately, it's not about being a better arts organization. It's understanding how to become a civic institution. It's not about advocating more for our needs, but it's really understanding the essential question in the Hamilton song. We talk about we want to be in the room where it happens. Well, what is it that is supposed to happen? How do we support it? And that it is the larger civic agenda. It's something above ourselves. It's something beyond ourselves. It's something beyond the immediate needs of our organization. And ultimately, it is what makes us relevant to the larger community above and beyond our theater audiences. Now, the good news is that we already know how to do this. We already have the tools. We already have the information. We have the arguments, we have the data. It only requires a small shift in our perception. And as I thought about how we do this at Hennepin Theater Trust, it really comes down to three key items. First is we need to shift our perspective and approach. We need to understand that this is not about advocating for me. This is about using my advocacy skills to advocate about us. And when we focus on us, it means we have to authentically focus on the other. We have to ask ourselves, why are we, not just me, but why are we at the table? It means defining the extrinsic benefits that matter. It means moving beyond just simply listing a bunch of impacts as a justification for funding to becoming intentional and deliberate and proactive about driving those impacts. It's about understanding to whom those impacts matter. And finally, it's about communicating common interest. It's not simply enough to wait till we need money to haul out these justifications, but it's consistently communicating how our actions affect others within the context of the other. It's about highlighting our actions, not the transactions that we want. So I'm going to go over these principles, and then I will also give you a few examples about how we've embodied these at Hennepin Theater Trust to achieve our status as a civic institution, not just a major arts organization. So the first thing we need to ask is the shift in perspective. Well, who is the us that we're talking about? If we have to move from advocating for me to us, who is the us? You know, we often talk about act like you've been there before. You know, when we're going to an event, when people want to be in the big leagues, you know, it's act like you've been there before. Don't act like a novice. And so the question that we have to ask ourselves is, well, who else is in that room? Who are they? What do they care about? So at Hennepin Theater Trust, we think in terms of three audiences. The primary audience is the audience for the event. It's the ones that we usually think of when we use the word audience, the people that we sell tickets to. They derive value through the content we present on stage. Secondary audience are our sponsors. They're really deriving content through the nature of the audiences that we attract. It might be the audience at an opera that Mercedes sponsors because the demographics and the relative affluence of the audience is something that they seek. But for our purposes today, what we're concerned about is the tertiary audience. That's the audience that connects with us on the basis of shared values. It's values that are articulated and demonstrated and driven by the impact and the outcomes that result from us doing our shows. This is where we get to the extrinsic values that we talk about in the arts, the economic impact, the tourism impact, the education impact, the job creation. That's where we connect, and that's how we become relevant to the community as we focus not only on creating these values, but also focus on the agencies that share those values and share the need to drive those outcomes. Another way of looking at this that we use is a simple Venn diagram. What is it that we do? What are the activities that we traditionally engage in, the programs, the activities that we attract people to? What are the results that are driven by those? What are the extrinsic results? And finally, the third and most important question is, to whom do those results matter and why do they matter? The why is a big question. When we find that sweet spot, when we find where they overlap, that's where intentionality lies. That's where our focus lies. That's where the key to becoming a civic institution lies. Another way of thinking about this, a final way, is simply asking ourselves 4 questions. Who cares about what we do? Why do they care about what we do? How much do they care? And most importantly, is how do I connect with them and let them know that we share their values? By doing this, we align our interests with civic leadership, and we create a platform for engagement that allows us to move from being a content producer to that civic institution. It allows us to become explicit and intentional about our outcomes, as opposed to random and developing those outcomes by chance. The second point is, how do we define those extrinsic benefits that matter? What is the civic agenda? It doesn't do us any good to have lots of outcomes if we can't prioritize those outcomes. We cannot be all things to all people. So we have to make decisions and prioritize. And we go back to the quote that many people are familiar with from Rufus Mills. He was in the Truman administration, decades and decades ago, but it's the old quote, where you stand on an issue depends on where you sit. And that is literally true as we start to determine, how do we align our priorities with other civic leaders? And so to that end, I talked earlier about taking a different perspective, a change in our point of view. And we literally take the 30,000-foot point of view. This is a screenshot from Google Earth of the Hennepin Theater District. This also defines our strategy for understanding how we become a civic institution. All of these things that are highlighted, all of these buildings that are highlighted, are part of Hennepin Theater Trust. Now, the fact is, we only actually own 5 of those properties. We only own 5 of those spaces. But every one of those is also part of Hennepin Theater Trust. The parking lots that are adjacent to us, we drive outcomes that matter to them. The hotels that are adjacent to us, we drive outcomes. The restaurants that are adjacent to us, the major buildings, the apartment buildings that are adjacent to us, and the charter school across the street, the school that is a performing arts conservatory. All of those are stakeholders in what we do. All of those are tangible representations, real representations of this abstract notion of civic engagement. And so as we look at where they sit, as we look at what they represent, we start with the specific and then go to the general. So we know that those hotels represent the larger civic association, the Hotel and Motel Association. So we need to be engaged with them. We need to be engaged with the Restaurant Association. They're all members of the Chamber of Commerce. So now suddenly we go from throwing a bunch of justifications for arts funding up against the wall to very specific actionable items with very specific actionable organizations. So when we think about engagement, again, we go from the abstract to the specific. And with that, our actions go from just arguing that we have an impact to being able to point to specific impacts. We are able to point to specific engagement tactics. We don't just provide room nights, we engage with specific hotels who then take the message back to the Hotel and Motel Association. So we have to understand that actions speak louder than words. It's not enough to talk about our impact. We have to walk the walk. We also have to start with the end in mind, and that end is not our end, but it's their end. What are their metrics of success? What are their KPIs? What are their goals? And how do we, through our actions, directly contribute to those goals? How do we frame our communication in terms of their goals? How do we let them know that we are working with intentionality toward their goals? And if we let them know that we're working with intentionality, that leads to the creation of relationships. It moves us from being a transactional organization to a relationship-driven organization, not only with those specific businesses, but with the larger civic organizations that they represent. In short, we're now able to align our activities with larger civic priorities. The final piece that we talked about in our 3 points, our 3 key points, is we need to communicate that we are achieving these goals. We need to communicate our intent. We need to communicate our motivation. And there's the old philosophical question, if you chop a tree down in the forest and there's no one there to hear it, does it make a sound? I can tell you from our experience, the answer to that question is no, it does not make a sound. And we in the arts have experienced that. We talk about our external benefits endlessly, but no action seems to happen because no one was there to hear it. It's after the fact that we're saying that tree made a sound, believe us. We need to demonstrate on a day-to-day basis. So we need to do our actions. We need to volunteer and get involved with their programs, because volunteering isn't just an action. Volunteering is a way to connect and communicate on a one-to-one basis. It's demonstrating that their values, not ours, are driving our activity. It's about promoting our impact, not just our programs. And so when we talk about our programs, we need to talk about them as proof points, as means to a larger end, not just an end in themselves. We in the arts, all too common, success begins and ends with the curtain going up and the curtain dropping. We need to talk about what happens after the curtain drops, why this matters, where are the echoes of the impact that we create. And finally, we need to offer our programs and activities in the context of not just our needs, but their needs. So before I get to some examples of how this actually functions in real life, how this is not just an abstract listing of concepts, but how this is actually played out at Hennepin Theater Trust, a few thoughts to keep in mind here. One is, it's not about supporting what we do. We're not asking to support what we do. It's about an opportunity to inform people who we are. Remember, we want to get in the room where it happens. We want to act like we've been there before. We want to show that we are a civic institution already. We're not invited to become one. We're invited in the room because we are one. It's not about telling our story. We talk about storytelling in the arts all the time, but we want to demonstrate how we're part of their story. That's what makes civic institutions great. There's this sense of something bigger than myself. And the more we advocate for ourselves, the more we insist on telling our story, the more exclusive and the smaller we become. We need to be part of the community story, and we need to tell our story against that backdrop. It's not about convincing people that we matter. It's not about justifying advocacy. It's about demonstrating through action day to day that they matter to us, that their agenda matters to us, and we are actively trying to achieve that. And finally, it's understanding that art matters in different ways, and sometimes it's not always the content itself. We talk about we want art to be relevant to the whole community and to matter to the whole community. Hennepin Theater Trust is one of the largest arts organizations in the state of Minnesota. We bring in 600,000 people a year. Even assuming we don't bring in any repeat customers, that means we're still only reaching something like 15 or 20% of the population of just the metro area. There is no way we can possibly have the entire community in our theaters. So how we matter sometimes doesn't take the form of relating to art. Sometimes we matter because we create jobs, we preserve jobs, we make it easier for other people to locate their businesses here. We make the quality of life better, we make someone's school better. So it's not always about the content, and we need to understand that. So how does this play out at Hennepin Theater Trust? So here's our mission statement. Nothing terribly unique about this. Tweak it a little bit, it could be the mission statement of 100 other major arts organizations throughout the country. You know, we drive cultural and economic vitality through the dynamic district and educational programming. Platitudes, generalities. How does this get us to become, how does this guide us to become a civic institution? Similarly, we can talk about the extrinsic benefits that we provide. You know, yes, we have different numbers than other people, but the argument's the same. You know, the creative industry creates $5 billion worth of impact in Minneapolis. The creative sector is bigger than the sports sector. You know, Hennepin Theater Trust has an email list of 350,000. We bring in 600,000 people a year and 125,000 visitors. That's not actionable. That doesn't tell me as a chamber of commerce or anyone else what exactly I do with Hennepin Theater Trust. It tells me that it means something, but it's not actionable. And going back to my first statement, it's our responsibility to make this actionable. The fault, dear Brutus, lies not in the stars, but in ourselves. So how do we do that at Hennepin Theater Trust? It starts with the very first step. It starts with our strategic plan. Our strategic plan isn't something that we try to connect with the strategic plan after the fact. It's driven by the civic agenda before we even put pencil to paper, before we even had our first board discussion. We want to be in the room where it happens. Well, let's define those rooms at the start. And we define those rooms as we want to be in the room with the chamber, with the tourism agency, with the school system, with the city government, and with the downtown leadership. So we started by reviewing their strategic plans. That allows us to understand their priorities. We learn their language. We learn what drives their success. We learn their KPIs and their metrics of success. And we also learned who are the businesses and other institutions that are behind the chamber and behind the tourism agency. And we went to their web pages and we learned what their KPIs were and how they viewed their civic involvement, how they viewed the civic agenda. That became the foundation for our strategic plan. We didn't slavishly follow that. We didn't mold our mission to follow theirs, but it certainly informed our mission, because if we want to be in those rooms where it is happening, we need to make sure we know how to behave like we've been there before, like we belong there. The second example is the Hennepin Avenue reconstruction. Now, I don't know many arts groups that use public works department involvement as a metric of success, but this was a huge metric of success for us being viewed as a major civic institution. City of Minneapolis is in the middle of rebuilding more than a mile of Hennepin Avenue, one of the major downtown thoroughfares, a 3-year project that is incredibly disruptive because it's tearing up Hennepin Avenue, building front to building front, going down 30 feet and replacing sewers and gas lines and repaving and sidewalks and everything. And Public Works invited 5 organizations to be part of a year-long planning effort beforehand. 5 public organizations that could help guide them, that could help connect with the community, that could help them navigate this process in a way that would both sell it to the community and create the least disruption. And it included the usual suspects. It included the Chamber of Commerce and the Downtown Development Authority and the tourism people. The fifth organization was Hennepin Theater Trust, an arts organization. Why was an arts organization in the room on a public works reconstruction project? We were there because they recognized us as a major civic institution, one that was a trusted authority, one that had PR reach, one that spoke to a large number of people, one that knew how to help manage reputation. We weren't there because they wanted art projects as part of this. We weren't there because they wanted murals on the barricades. We weren't there because they wanted us to design art elements for the street. We were there because we were a trusted civic institution that needed to be in the room for an important civic project. Another area is tourism. We bring in 120,000 plus visitors a year. We have a wide reach in messaging, 5 states in upper Midwest, as well as Canadian provinces. But we never were in the room with the tourism people. And we weren't in the room because we didn't address their agenda. We always asked them to support our projects. My first meeting with the tourism people was to talk about what drives their agenda. And it's room nights, it's visibility, it's reputation. Those are their KPIs. And the first step that we took was to inform them about the numbers we drove. But beyond that, we offered them the mailing list of those out-of-town visitors. And we said, here, look at this data, analyze this, see how this fits with your profile for visitors. We shared with them our 350,000 name email list so they could analyze that and see how that overlapped with their messaging. We asked them for their key target markets. We asked them for their messaging calendar. We asked them for their messaging points and aligned our marketing efforts with those messaging points and with those calendars. As a result of that, we secured a place on the Minneapolis board. Their CEO is now on the Hennepin Theater Trust board. And as a result of being on the board, we've also been able to secure spots on the board for other arts groups. So the arts now have a seat at the table with tourism. We're in the room where it happens. Education's another key area. We approach the schools with the same attitude. We didn't create an education program to promote theater with the goal. We didn't build it with the initial idea of teaching students how to do better theater. We didn't approach it with the idea of building future audiences. What we did is we went to the schools and we understood 2 things. One is schools are anchor institutions in their community, especially in the smaller communities in the state. And we went to the schools offering support for what they do, not asking them to support us, but we came to them supporting their agenda. The message was, you already have theater programs, you value them. It might be a major theater program in an affluent school. It might be a simple school play where the high school English teacher is directing it. But we came to them and said, we are here to help you. What do you need? Do you need professional workshops with Broadway artists? We will make those happen. Do you need technical assistance to outfit your theater? We will make that happen. Or do you simply need reviews and professionals giving you critiques of your shows? We will make that happen. But we met them based on their needs. That has allowed us to become a major educational institution. The result has been that we now have strong legislative connections through the state because we have made local communities stronger. It means we have a network to distribute our content. It means we've been able to expand our grant applications. So we're not asking for support for arts education. We're now asking for support and receiving support for community building grants, for civic improvement grants. And we received an invitation from the Minneapolis schools to be part of the planning process to convert a high school adjacent to our theater, right across the street from our largest theater, into a conservatory model based on creative industries. We have become a civic institution in the arts education field. Finally, the last thing is public art. We have a robust public art program. One of our major programs is It's the People. It's a public art exhibit of that photographs and it's portraits of the people that make up the city, the people that make up Hennepin Avenue in the Arts District and illustrate the vibrancy. It's theater goers, but it's also the transit drivers, it's the police, it's the patrons of some of the bars, it's the homeless people on the street. And we partnered with Clear Channel. This isn't a gallery exhibit, but these are billboard-sized portraits portrayed downtown. Clear Channel has put up a dozen billboards with these portraits. But the point is, the thing that made this a civic agenda item is that this starts illustrating to us in the community who we are as a community. It illustrates the diversity and equity and inclusion aspect of the community. It's about promoting the vibrancy because these are outside. It brings people on the streets. This isn't about the portraits themselves. It's also about the process of creating those portraits. And so again, it's turned us into a civic institution where the grants that we get to support this are not just arts grants, but they're grants based on DEI work. We even got a grant for violence prevention because we're engaging teenagers at risk of homelessness in this project. And it's providing positive outlets for their activity. Again, Hennepin Theater Trust goes from being a theater organization to a civic institution. So in closing, we don't seek funding to, I'm bringing this full circle, you know, as I started with, the arts need funding. And I don't want to lose sight of the fact that this ultimately is about making the arts organization stronger. But the key has been not seeking funding to support our programs, but we seek funding because our programming supports the values of others. And we now have others making the case for the arts. We have others talking about the extrinsic values. We have other people's strategic plans demonstrating our impact. That in turn has broadened the support for the arts. It's strengthened our role in the community and it's strengthened our connections. So as we close, we want to keep in mind that art matters in different ways. It's both and. We haven't lost sight of the fact that we do provide important content, and what goes on in the walls, within the walls of the theaters is very important. But we also don't want to lose sight of what happens after the concert and the process of creating art. We know that people want to be involved because of values, their values, not our values. And we demonstrate the values, we demonstrate shared values by what we contribute, not what we ask for, but what we contribute. And in doing so, that allows us to find a place in their story. So we don't have to focus on always telling our story. And it allows us to talk about what we do in order to demonstrate who we are, and that who we are is a major civic institution. So I hope this is of help. It's been an incredible motivation for Hennepin Theater Trust. It's really put us at the center of city life, and that's where we want the arts to be. We want the arts to matter in community, and we do matter. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this fantastic presentation, Mark. We're going to have a brief moderated conversation, and so I have a few questions for you following up on what you just shared with us. I am wondering, with all of this incredible work, how have you and your staff balanced the needs of your own organization and capacity with figuring out how to prioritize which partners to pursue and when?
Yeah, that's an important question because capacity is always a critical thing in the arts. We're chronically under-resourced and over-ambitioned. And so it is important to figure that out. And I think there's two pieces to that. One, it goes back to the Venn diagram that I showed early in the presentation. The idea is that how do we align what it is we already want to do with the interest of others? And so that's why it's really important to spend a little bit of time on that front end, looking at those other strategic plans, figuring out what room we want to be in, so that we aren't caught up with trying to be all things to all people. And I've seen that with arts organizations where, whatever the cause du jour is, we want to be part of that. So, we met with the chamber and they're talking about economic impact, so we have to do all kinds of economic impact stuff. And then we talk with the business agencies and we want to do more to recruit businesses. What we have to do is look at where our work aligns with other work. And by doing so, it really becomes more of an exercise in communication than it does in doing new stuff. The burden really falls on the communication staff to think about how we tell our story and to find those easy points of connectivity rather than inventing big new projects. The other piece of it too is that we want to make sure that we understand where the best return on investment is for us. We're not trying to become a civic institution for the sake of it. We're becoming a civic institution to the extent that it overlaps with our mission and our vision and enhances our ultimate support. So if we don't think that way, then it does become a capacity issue.
Right. And, in this presentation, and just I know from working with you, you've done such incredible work with a broad group of civic partners. Can you expand a little bit on how the business community and chambers of commerce in particular fit into the way you approach ecosystem thinking and partnership work?
It's a little bit tricky sometimes with the chamber and things like that, because the tendency, I think, in the past has been we want to be part of the chamber because that's where we'll meet people and we can ask for money. And so for us, it was looking at who are the organizations that are really driving the city agenda, who are the organizations that seem to be behind a lot of the activities, and do we feel comfortable working with them? Do they align with our values? And ultimately, will that benefit us? And so clearly in Minneapolis, it's in Minnesota in general, it's a state that has disproportionately high corporate funding for the arts. We're blessed with off the charts funding. So we know that we have to be involved with the chamber that way. We know that we have to be involved with the downtown council because we are in the heart of the downtown. We drive much of the downtown. We drive a lot of the business and certainly the identity. So it became an easy thing to align with them in terms of the work that they're doing. And we're also fortunate that with a really progressive community here in Minnesota, that those organizations do take a broad civic view as well. I mean, I use that word civic institution with all deliberateness, because it's not, we don't want to be just a business organization. We truly want to be about the larger civic agenda. And those, quite honestly, are the organizations that are really driving the civic agenda in large ways or concerned with those civic agendas.
Right, great. This is a little bit more of a maybe theoretical question, but I'm wondering if you can talk about how you and your staff go about understanding and identifying the needs in Minneapolis for a healthy business and arts environment to exist, and then going a little bit further into the process that you find for alignment, again, so that staff doesn't get overwhelmed, but also so that mutual needs are met in these partnerships.
Yeah, but I like the first part of that question, how defining the healthy environment. That's a little bit of a tricky one, because of course, from the arts perspective, it's like, well, allow us to do more stuff. And I think, I guess that comes back to the slide I had about how we developed our strategic plan. It starts with looking at their strategic plans, not uncritically, but still looking at their strategic plan so we can start determining, do we agree with those outcomes? Those outcomes that they're trying to drive align with our values, with our mission, with our sensibility of what a good community is supposed to be. So there is an element of knowing ourselves, also knowing our values and seeing if there's alignment. There's also a question, though, of taking cues from them and learning from them as they talk about what they are trying to achieve. Because keep in mind, the chamber represents a lot of businesses. It's sort of a consensus filter for the business community and working with tourism agencies. And so by working with a number of different agencies, we're also not getting a single point of view. I mean, keep in mind that the city's plan was also important to us. And so that means we're getting the city council's view and the elected officials and the electorate's perspective. So it's mashing all of those together and finding the commonality that gives us confidence that this is a consensus view about what a healthy community looks like. This is a consensus view of what we as a community are prioritizing. So it's not just the arts, it's not just the uncritical business community, and it's not just the electorate in any given neighborhood, but truly a consensus.
That's great. And I think this next question will probably expand on that a little bit. But I'm hoping maybe you can talk a little bit about navigating or asking about diversity, equity, and inclusion and access goals within your business partners or among the chamber, and how you find alignment in Hennepin's own DEIA goals and those of your partners.
That's certainly been an important issue. I think it's an important issue across the country, and certainly here in Minneapolis, you know, with the follow-up to George Floyd's murder, that that's been a very important question here that organizations have had to confront. I think it's been one that we've been very happy that the arts organizations, even prior to that, the major arts organizations have an organization that was addressing those issues and working proactively in that area. And certainly, I think we've seen it with all of these other institutions that we work with. And this has been one of the values of being in the room, being on the boards or being on advisory groups with them, is that we get to see firsthand the thinking, we get to see firsthand how they're dealing with these. So that's what gives us confidence to know that they share our values. And so as board members for many of these organizations, we've had influence, so we can bring our experience about DEI. We've been able to bring our experience of working with the community to the table and not only respond to their agenda, but also help to drive their agenda and reinforce the agenda in this area. And so we see firsthand how the Chamber of Commerce has recognized what Minneapolis needs to do, how the tourism agencies have recognized that, and so on down the line. And then by working directly in the school systems, I mean, half of the schools that we work with are within the metro area. And so we can be deeply involved firsthand with DEI issues there as well. And our partners like Disney and some of the other Broadway shows bring that same thinking to the table. So it's all the more reason to be at the table and in the room so we can influence the behavior of these organizations and be real partners in a common goal.
That's so important, and I'm so glad that you brought up George Floyd, because I wanted to ask about in the wake of not just COVID-19, but Minneapolis has been through so much, being the site of George Floyd's murder, what that economic recovery and social, hopefully rebuilding, but kind of reimagining in hopefully new ways, what that's looking like right now with you and the civic partners that you're working with.
I'm glad you used that word, reimagining. That's a great part of the question, because the focus, that really is what it feels like right now. I mean, the last couple of years, I mean, certainly we've been dealing with pandemic like everyone else. We've been dealing with the awareness of the issues that have been raised, but because the trial, because of us being where the murder happened, it's taken on a little bit different tone. And I think the good thing is that what we've seen is that the community coming together to deal with these issues and address these issues. And it's been some painful conversations, many uncomfortable conversations, but I think we're getting to the point of that reimagining where we're seeing with the elections, the city council and the mayoral election being passed now, where we're moving into the place where we're able to take proactive steps. And that's really encouraging. It's encouraging to see how a community works together. It really is about reimagining. The conversations are not just about, well, now we can go back to the way we were, but it's called into question a lot of values. It's not just values with respect to DEI, but it's values about what does the downtown mean with respect to the community? What are the role of the arts beyond just we have great shows and we're recognized as one of the prime arts cities in the country, but it's called into question about what is the role of the arts as civic institutions and how do we work with, so that reimagining has taken place on a lot of different levels. It's reimagining relationships, it's reimagining who we want to be as a city, it's reimagining how we tell our story as a city, it's reimagining what a successful downtown looks like, what does a successful arts organization look like. And it seems all very quaint, but just a couple of years ago, successful arts organization meant, well, we have this wonderful artistic vision and we do X number of shows a year and we sell this many tickets and we raise this much money and, well, we're done, right? Suddenly it's not that simple anymore. And that's been challenging, but where we're at right now, it's also been extraordinarily gratifying to be part of that process, as difficult it's been, as fraught with pitfalls as it's been, to be able to ask these fundamental questions. So reimagining is really, we've moved beyond and we're at the reimagining stage and we're acting on that vision now.
That's really, really good to hear. And I appreciate you, talking about that a little more deeply. I think that's the end of my questions. Before we close, is there anything else that you want to add?
I just want to reinforce that the fundamental point that I made at the very beginning, that it's really important to understand this. And this goes back to your last question about reimagining. The arts aren't going to go back to the way we were. We're never going to be that way, and we shouldn't be that way. And this idea that if we really, the fundamental principle of the arts is that we want the arts to be for everyone. We want the arts to be an important part of the community. And it's incumbent on us, whether we're a big organization like Hennepin Theater Trust that operates on a statewide or certainly a metro-wide basis, or we're a small organization that operates just on a neighborhood basis. Scale doesn't matter. What matters is that idea that we need to think beyond the walls of our theater. We need to think about why we matter as an organization, not just the what we do, but the who we are and how we contribute to the larger good, and understand that it is through the content that we create, but it's also through who we are. And ironically, we ask businesses to think beyond the walls of their business and join our board and support our cause. Well, we need to look in the mirror and take that same perspective ourselves and go, what are we doing to support other causes? What are we doing as a business? And we don't do that often enough. And it's not just a utilitarian thing. It's not just about finding more funding. It's not becoming a civic institution so we can do more shows. That's the right thing to do. That's how the arts affect society. And we need to get beyond the idea that the only way we affect society is through the content and through the intrinsic value of the arts. And we need the intrinsic value and we need the extrinsic. And both of those deserve the same degree of attention and the same degree of intentionality.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much. I do agree that in this new era, working together is really going to be the only way forward. We can't afford to work in our own silos and in our own lanes anymore.
We can't.
Thank you. Thank you
Thanks
so
for the
much for
opportunity.
this presentation. Yeah, and this conversation. I really appreciate it. It's been really delightful.
Thank you.
As a reminder, yeah, thank you. As a reminder, this is the first session of How to Partner with Your Chamber of Commerce, Part 2. As part of this package, there are 2 additional pre-recorded sessions and a digital toolkit to accompany this content. We invite you to participate in periodic live discussions with various presenters in these programs to ask questions and discuss with your peers. Part 1, The Basics, is available on ArtsU and also includes 3 on-demand sessions and a toolkit. The entire series is available on ArtsU, and you can also find the toolkits on the Partnership Movement at partnershipmovement.org. Many thanks again to Mark, and thank you to our community for listening to this series.